Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Economic issues usually are the norm at the Alpine gathering of the global elite in Davos. However, Ukraine and Trump have topped the agenda this year. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has called for 200,000 troops to secure his country from Russian aggression in case of a peace settlement. Western peacekeeping troops were first floated by French President Macron and discussed with with allies, including a recent meeting with Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk. How practicable is this proposition? Well, to explore that question, we are joined by Andreas Umland. He's an analyst with Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Umland, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me again.
It's a pleasure, sir. So, sounds like an interesting idea, but you need peace first. And President Putin doesn't seem particularly excited about that idea. What do you make of the situation with regard to some kind of peace deal in the near future?
I would rather speak of a ceasefire, perhaps, for now, but even that will be difficult because it would, for instance, presume that the current front line is frozen. Putin cannot do that, at least not as long as legitimate Russian state territory in the Kursk Oblast is partly occupied by Ukraine. And also, according to the Russian constitution, the 4 annexed mainland regions that were partly occupied in 2022 and then made a part of the Russian Federation, have to be fully in the Russian Federation, according to the Russian constitution. This is all illegal and illegitimate, of course, but even a ceasefire is very difficult to implement right now. A peace, I think, is an even more complicated things to do because Putin has here ideas not just for the occupied territories, but also for Ukraine as a whole. And to come to an agreement there will be very difficult.
Understood. Now, yesterday, President Trump said in an interview with Fox News, and I quote, Zelenskyy is, quote, no angel. And shouldn't have allowed this war to happen. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I mean, the war started actually under the President Yanukovych already, when Yanukovych was still in power. The annexation, the occupation of Crimea started. Then there was an interim president called Alexander Turchynov for 3 months. Then there was Petro Poroshenko for 5 years. Zelenskyy is now the 4th president of Ukraine under whom this war is happening. So I don't think that Zelenskyy or another person has here much of a leverage or of an agency. Russia has an ideology, a well-established ideology from the 19th century. It's saying that Ukraine and Belarus are part of the Russian people, the Ruski Narod, and that is the problem, and not who is president of Ukraine.
Understood. Now, it's quite interesting. Donald Trump is famous, or should I say infamous, for making off-the-cuff statements which he then kind of edits. Now, one of those, of course, is that he would end the war in Russia and Ukraine in a day. Now that, of course, he's changed to a longer period of time. What do you think his plan is?
I guess he wants to indeed end the war because that would be very popular. The problem here is that Putin does not want an end to the war. He maybe also wants an end to the war, but he wants what is called in German a Siegfrieden, a victorious peace, a victory. And that, unfortunately, most Russians also, they want, first of all, a victory and then peace. And And that, again, I think is not very popular. I mean, it's not popular in Ukraine, obviously, but it's also not very popular in the US. So I think that is the dilemma in which Trump is now. I don't think he cares really about Ukraine or international law or whatever is happening in Eastern Europe. But what he does care is American public opinion. And if the peace or the ceasefire that comes out of this is then to the obvious disadvantage of Ukraine, and Russia comes out here as a sort of partial winner in all of this, that will be a domestic problem for him. And therefore, I think he will be trying to get to a situation that he can sell in the US as something that is acceptable to Ukraine.
Understood. Now, I'd like to move on to the 200,000 peacekeepers that President Zelenskyy has asked for. It's actually rather surprising the extent of support there is amongst European countries for sending some peacekeepers to Ukraine. But 200,000 is a large number. And the general consensus is that getting that number is going to be a major challenge, if not impossible, for European countries. But it's a risky move, isn't it? Having NATO soldiers on Ukrainian soil. I mean, what happens if they shoot a Russian soldier?
I mean, there is a large experience of these peacekeeping missions. The large biggest one in Europe was the one in Yugoslavia, and I think the Yugoslav experience is also the basis for this calculation that Ukraine has made. In fact, this idea of peacekeepers in eastern Ukraine has been already made by President Poroshenko in 2015. It has been discussed in Ukraine since 2014. And when there was only the Donbas war, then the number was already then 40,000 that was circulated as something that would then sort of mirror the situation that was in Yugoslavia and the number of peacekeepers there. Now we have a much larger front line. Therefore, 200,000 is perhaps even in the lower range of what is indeed needed. And escalation indeed can happen and does happen in such peacekeeping missions. The problem that I see here, the principal problem, is that these peacekeepers would then, in a very odd way, help Russia to hold its territory, its illegally occupied territory. So the UN would, if the UN, for instance, sends the peacekeepers, would then become part itself of an operation of territorial expansion. That may be still something that is in the interests of Ukraine, because it then gets, at least for the rump territory, that it can keep peace, and these peacekeepers can perhaps indeed keep the peace. However, they will also keep up the violation of the UN Charter, basic international law, basically an abrogation of the logic of the non-proliferation regime for nuclear weapons, because Russia is a nuclear weapon state, Ukraine is a non-nuclear weapon state, and so on. So it would be an odd situation, in fact, to have then these peacekeepers that would actually be keeping occupied territory for Russia.
Now, some might say, well, look, when Russian nuclear weapons were taken out of Ukraine, Ukraine's sovereignty was guaranteed by the US and Russia, and having peacekeepers, on Ukrainian territory is simply action to implement that guarantee. What would you say to that argument?
That would be all perfect if the peacekeepers will be on the Russian-Ukrainian border and securing the Russian-Ukrainian border. That is, by the way, recognized by Russia in numerous agreements, among them the 2003 Russian-Ukrainian border treaty, which was signed by Putin during his first presidency. It's a fully ratified treaty. So if these peacekeepers indeed are then on the border, then this would be all fine, and that would also correspond to the Budapest Memorandum, to the UN Charter, to the Helsinki Final Act, to the Paris Charter, and so on. That would be a perfect solution, but that is, of course, not what Putin will accept.
Well, no, quite. And I suppose it would bolster Putin's argument that he invaded Ukraine simply to protect against NATO expansion. He can go back to his people and say, well, there you go, we have NATO troops on the border with Russia. If he were to say that, and he probably would, what do you think the response of the Russian population and the political classes would be?
Well, I mean, if he would agree to basically giving back the territory, I think that would be, of course, a huge problem for him. That's why he's not doing that. Although Russia has now these economic problems, I think he may want to get out of this war, and he may even regret having escalated it in 2022. But now, if he appears as a loser in all of that, that is, of course, then domestically very dangerous for him. And we should also not forget that, he is more reflecting a general mood of the Russian political and intellectual elite. The Russian opposition says, no Putin, no war, but you can also say it the other way around, no war, no Putin. So this war is popular. It's based, as I said, on 19th century nationalist Russian ideology. And therefore, Putin is here in a way fulfilling a mission that many Russians see as actually legitimate and traditional and fully in compliance with Russian history.
Understood. Now, very, very briefly, if you would, please, Andreas. Now, in Davos, Donald Trump said that basically if the price of oil comes down, Russia will simply not be able to afford to prosecute this war. What's your comment on that?
That is a good idea. I think the income from the oil exports are a major factor in the Russian budget, and that should have been the strategy already in 2022, in fact, already in 2014, when Crimea was annexed. And if that is now implemented systematically in a consortium of countries that will try to lower the oil price significantly and for longer, that is actually a very good strategy. And then Putin will be very, very much under pressure to end the war and to get the economy running again.
Understood. Well, we'll be watching the situation carefully. Andreas Umland, thank you once again for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. World News coming right up. Bye-bye.